The Apprentice. Written and read by Ken Johnson. Episode 2. Theo had been working at Sunlight for a bit over 3 weeks. They gave him something harmless to do, he did it, and everyone told him, correctly, that he was doing it well. He took the Scottish public holiday long weekend off, mainly to reassure his mother, Margaret, that the job he had accepted really existed. He was not sleeping freezing cold under a bridge in constant terror of the bailiffs and without enough money for the train fare home, and nor had he starved to death due to living by himself and not knowing how or where to buy food. Slipping away early and unremarked from the works on this Friday, he managed to arrive at his family's large and nearly empty house in Craigkelt a few minutes before midnight. His mum had plainly already gone to bed. She was barefoot and wearing her dressing gown when she opened the front door. "Theo," she beamed at him, "at last. I thought you'd missed the train. Come in, come in." She thought for a second and added, "I'm overjoyed to see you." "Why is that? Has everything been all right?" "Oh yes, absolutely. It was just so late that I thought you might have decided to travel tomorrow, or maybe you missed the train somewhere along the way." When Theo had been given the job and set off for Waverley Station a month early, carrying a canvas sports bag of essentials, the house was exactly the same as it had been when Mum and Dad had first moved into it together in 1970 or thereabouts. Furniture, decorations, everything that they had bought for their house when they moved into it was still standing in the same place, and little had been added since. The dining room, with its carved table and matching chairs and hand-painted crockery hung on the walls, far too big for one woman and her occasional visitor, looked as though, for the whole month, Mum had not so much as stood in it. Years ago, the room had been arranged as if for an antique furniture catalogue, and, apart from a couple of photographs of his father's funeral, left undisturbed thereafter. The trains were on time, pretty much. Theo recounted the long journey. "It's just a long way. The train that leaves Rosentyre at 6 doesn't get to Edinburgh until 11, and then you must be very tired. I cooked sausage and mash earlier, but it was so late that I ate my share, and then I left the rest to cool. It's still on the stove if you want some." "Yes, please. I haven't eaten since lunchtime." "Well, I can heat it up, I suppose." "Don't bother. I can eat it cold." Margaret brought a plate laden with cold dinner out of the kitchen, set it in front of her son with a knife and fork, and watched him start to eat. "It's not much," Margaret said apologetically, "but as it's so late, it's my favourite. And they almost never cook it in the canteen." "What's the food like?" Margaret asked. "Not bad, considering." Theo thought about the canteen food. "They make us a cheap cooked breakfast, lunch and a hot dinner in the evening. If you live alone, it's a lot less trouble than cooking for yourself." "You haven't found a girlfriend, then?" Margaret drew the obvious conclusion. "Afraid not, Mum. I'm signed up to this internet thing, Medjool Dates. You never know." "How much did that cost you?" £30 a month. "And how many women have you—" "I've had 3 phone calls." "I know a waste of time and money when I hear about one." Margaret dismissed Medjool Dates with blistering scepticism. "Go to the church and look. All the lonely women go to church. They think God can't be bothered sending them a husband, and if they don't suck up to him, they'll wake up one morning and realise they've turned into creaking elderly spinsters with grey hair and walking sticks. You don't want to be all alone for the rest of your life now." "I hadn't thought of that. I did think of laundrettes and art galleries, but there aren't any." "How do you manage without a laundrette?" "I got a second-hand washing machine. It works most of the time. I've only had the repairman in twice. Anyway, I can hardly tell my date that the reason I'm trying to find a girlfriend is because I haven't got a washing machine, can I? No, said Margaret, after careful consideration. You'll need to get your story straight. I need an angel to brighten up my dull and aimless existence. Girls love that sort of nonsense. Theo had eaten everything on his plate. Your room's just how you left it, said Margaret. By the way, how's the job? It's all right. I've not got any life-altering decisions to take or anything. I'm not supposed to talk about what I do. Oh, that's the management fad of the week, is it? Make them keep everything a secret and they'll work more for less wages. Is that it? Well, Mum, it breaks no secrets to tell you that they knew I was a mathematician, so they put me onto estimating demand. For the last 3 weeks, I've been trying to work out how to predict the number of customers who'll come knocking on the door if they can find it, and how much money they'll spend when they do. I told them to buy me a crystal ball and ask that, but they said, no, we want to get accurate predictions without crossing any palms with silver, and we already do. So after a Fourier analysis that fills more paper than the Daily Mirror does in a week, I've got half a dozen relevant correlations and some seasonal cycles. That's further above my head than a flight to Bermuda, said Margaret. And I need my sleep, I'm afraid. I'm really pleased that you've found a niche for yourself. Good night. See you tomorrow. Theo awoke while it was still dark. The room was silent, for the clanks and hoots of Rosentire Harbour were many miles away. He thought for a few seconds that he heard voices, but then realised that his mother was lying in bed listening to her radio, or, more likely, she had fallen asleep without first turning the radio off. He lay still for a while and then realised that as long as the radio was playing, he wouldn't get another wink of sleep. Late-night radio presenters were expert at keeping their listeners awake. The jingles, the shouts of feigned surprise and well-rehearsed delight, the hoots of laughter, the 40-year-old pop records, the sound effects, the scripted phone calls were all added to the waffle in carefully measured numbers like currants to a fruitcake, one every 8 minutes. Just enough to keep sleepy listeners awake. Mum, he whispered, as he tiptoed into her bedroom, not wanting to wake her if she was asleep. It's all right. I'm awake. Can you not sleep? Something's keeping me awake, she said. You're troubled, I can tell. There's something not quite right about the job, isn't there? Mum, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. Ah, you're a good man, but you're no Tom Cruise. So, there is something. Do you want to throw the job in and come home? Everybody makes false starts sometimes. Look at me, for instance. You'd be welcome to come and live here, you know. Theo found the prospect of living at home with someone he had known and loved all his life in the town he had known and loved all his life more attractive than it had appeared when he was actually living there. What would we live on? He asked. I've still got my lifelong annuity, my works pension, the state pension if I'm desperate, and you'll get some Nash, I expect. We can live on that if we both stop eating. Don't sneer too loudly. Your grandfather was a good and generous man, so why do you stay at wherever you are? Sunlight. Mum, I don't want to sound any more exasperated than I really am, but you do realise my job and everything connected with it is top secret. Guessing how many customers will come into a farrier's shop is top secret, pull the other one. It's the truth. I really have been asked to estimate future sales. But what worries me? Theo tailed off. Yes? You don't think I sat up until this hour to listen to Moss and Myra's late-night lorry driver sing-along, did you? Can a horseshoe factory afford a sales estimate from a St. Hubert's graduate mathematician, even if it needed one? Come on, I've let this banal drivel keep me awake all night in order to hear this. I've seen them removing dead bodies from the stockyard. Well, there's the thing. Thanks for telling me. Shall I go to sleep now, or will you? That's all I know. There isn't much more I could tell you. I don't know what they're doing, and I don't know how deep in the mire I already am.